back. Welcome back to another episode of A Gift from Adversity. My name is Juri Love. I'm your host. Thank you very much for tuning in. Today we are recording episode 135, and I'm very grateful to have another guest for the show. Before I introduce our guest, I want to introduce my book, which is the same title as this podcast. It's called A Gift from Adversity by Juri, Juri, Love, Love. It's available on Amazon, and the subtitle of this book is called Overcoming Sexual Abuse, Domestic Violence, Bullying, and Homelessness. When I started to publish this book and then getting a lot of messages from all over the world, people sharing the stories, I felt compelled to start a podcast and then platform where people can share their adversities. But not only that, tools that people use to overcome these challenges, and then a gift that came from it. So I'm very grateful to have another guest on my show. So let's invite her. Hello, Becca. Thank you very much for coming in to the show today.
Hi, it's grateful. I'm grateful to be here. I'm excited to share my story.
Perfect. So let's start with stating your name, where you're coming in from, and what you do, and then if you have any social media, any website that you want to promote.
Yeah, I'm Rebecca Engle. I have social media. My Instagrams are Rebby or Rebby Crafts, and then I have Rebby Neuropoetic, and then I also have RE02.20. And those are my three accounts. I also have Facebook. You can find me at Rebby Crafts on Facebook or Becca Engle. I'm coming in from San Antonio, Texas.
How is Texas?
It is a mess here. I can't decide what temperature it wants to be outside. Yesterday we had like cold front, and today it was like I was sweating. So,
What temperature are you guys in right now?
um, probably about 57, 60.
Well, I'm jealous. I think we are in like 30s here. We are in Massachusetts, so it's very, very cold.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine.
Well, thank you so much for coming to the show today. So let's dive into the first question. So, can you tell our audience what was your adversity?
So I guess the best way to put it is I was nonverbal until 4. I was misdiagnosed multiple times. Things went around. Eventually diagnosed with pervasive developmental disorder, which now falls on the autism spectrum disorders.
So, what do you mean by misdiagnosed?
Sure. So when I was really little, they misdiagnosed me with grand mal epilepsy as a baby, which then turned into benign proximal vertigo. My parents traveled across state lines to get that diagnosis. And then later on, it turned into um, other developmental delays. And, people were kind of like, doctors kind of questioned it, and they were like, don't compare her to her siblings, like she'll be fine. And then life continued on, and it became a little bit more severe. And later, it turned into who I am today.
So let's go back. What is your first memory? Do you recall, did your parents tell you all of these stories, or do you remember going to a lot of doctors and then like, getting this diagnosis, misdiagnosis? What do you remember? What do you recall?
So a lot of it is what my parents have told me. I do remember probably back about 3 years old. I have a little bit of memories from school. I could probably tell you every day in school from the age of 3 to the day I graduated college. As far as medical appointments, my mind would be completely clear of that.
So you kind of mentioned pre-interview when you messaged me about bullying and discrimination. Do you recall those kind of hardship at school?
Oh yeah, most definitely. I dealt with sexual harassment, I dealt with bullying, I dealt with, the insults from both going through just being different from my peers. And, I changed from an IEP student, which is a special needs student, to a gen ed student right at the end of my transition into middle school. So, middle school, as many of us know, is that time where people are starting to, kind of be rude, and, there's hormones and things are kind of happening. So, it was, this new girl who used to be kind of segregated from everybody coming in and being in all honors classes. So people didn't know how to, interpret me. And I was kind of a question. So they thought that they could attack me and come at me. So I dealt with bullying practically all through my younger years because, I was the only kid really pulled out of class back then. And then all the way up until the day I graduated high school. Um, for being different. I was, nerdy and really, really cared about school. I was a rule follower, um, and that didn't fit the rest of the school that I attended. So I was pushed to the side and mistreated consistently.
And then remind us, what was your correct true diagnosis?
Pervasive developmental disorder, speech apraxia, and sensory processing disorder.
That is a mouthful.
Yes.
How can you even remember? And then what is it actually?
So, pervasive developmental disorder falls on the autism spectrum disorders. I don't like to necessarily always say autism just because back then it was referred to as pervasive developmental disorder, which is right below autism spectrum disorder. Um, if I were to go back and get re-diagnosed, it would probably fall on those autism spectrum disorders. I also have a sensory processing disorder, which is my ability to process sounds and noises and things going on around me. Anything that your senses do, your five senses, I'm kind of slow at. And then um, my speech apraxia is the ability to say my sounds. That goes away typically with age for a lot of people. Some people it doesn't. Luckily, mine has faded. Uh, my speech apraxia really kicks in when I'm nervous and I'll start kind of freaking out and stuttering. And then as for my, you know, pervasive mental disorder, it's just my development was delayed and behind. So um, it was backtracked a few years. So now that I'm developmentally progressed and, I'm an adult, it's a different situation, but I still have those sensory issues and those little things that put me separate from people, but I do tend to, blend in with the norm.
So you went to college.
Yes.
What was your major?
Interdisciplinary studies with minors in literacy, reading, history, and special education.
And then how was the college experience versus like elementary, middle school, high school? Was it better or worse?
I would say that my undergrad was drastically worse than high school.
What?
Um, and I think it's because I was a lot more vocal because I was in classes specifically to learn about special education a lot of the time. And so I was a lot more vocal about who I was in my past and my history. And not to say I regret that because I really don't, because I think it created a name for myself and created my passion. But had I been less vocal, I think I would have faced less issues. At the end of my sophomore year, I applied to do teacher education, which most people apply to in their junior year, but I was a junior by the hours. So I applied early and they were like, "We don't really like you. Like, we don't think that you're fit for this." And I was like, "Oh, why?" And I had conversations face to face, and a lot of the time I was hit with, "Well, it just, we don't like the way you talk." And I'd be like, "Okay, but what, can you give me an example?" And I was always told, "No, we can't provide an example." And I'd be like, "Okay, well, then I can't change." uh, so it was always hit with these little comments. And then going all the way up until most recently, which this was September of 2021, but going into September 2023, I was told all these promises in September 2022 that they were going to help me, progress and become this individual that they wanted me to be. And they were going to have meetings with me to change those issues. And I was like, great. And I was contacting them and I was, like, okay, let's do this, let's set these up. Let's make me the individual y'all think I need to be as an educator. And none of those meetings ever happened. They sat me down in a room in 2023 September and told me, yeah, we just don't like you, and we don't think that you're fit for this, and um, here's all the things that you need to change if you want to teach with us. And also all of your peers will find out about clinical teaching, which is the final semester of student teaching, um, in November, and you'll find out in late December, which is after all the semester is already ended. So if I didn't get in, I wouldn't be able to register for classes. So I said, yeah, I think I'm okay. And I graduated and I'm working on my alt cert as for in grad school. However, um, I have had a lot better experience in grad school than I did in my undergrad, and I'm very thankful for that so far.
So right now you're in a grad school,
Yes,
and are they treating you better?
drastically.
I am so sorry.
I I've overcome it, and that's the that's the important thing, is that their comments didn't get to me. And I do have people in my undergrad that are, there for me today, cheering me on and helping me become the teacher I want to become. And that's what I'm grateful for. There were 9 people that made that decision, and only 2 liked me. And those 2 were the only 2 that ever actually saw me teach in a classroom.
So them means teachers or admins?
So yeah, so there was 9 like professors and like staff that were like,
Why are they even teaching? I can't even understand. I don't even understand why they are getting paid to do this job. I don't understand that they don't have DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. I don't understand why they are not trained to teach different population, but that's the whole another issue. Let's go back to a little bit of your childhood, because a lot of people who don't necessarily try to understand these challenges, and especially like learning challenges in school, tend to bully kids and tend to isolate kids. And
mhm.
then with your perspective, what was the most hurtful thing that people had said to you that you remember or recall, that you came home crying and then parents were crying? Do you recall anything that people said to you at all?
Oh yeah. I was asked from time to time why I flap like a bird. Um, and I think it's because, and looking back, it hurt me back then, but I think looking back, it was the lack of understanding around the sensory issues. Cause, I used to do this with my arms, and, a lot of, and I still do. But I think the lack of understanding around that is what caused that comment, because people didn't understand, like, I'm a human, like, why am I, because that lack of education around disability. Um, but I got told that. I got comments about my weight quite often, burying different things. I was heavier in high school. I wasn't as much in middle school and elementary school. In elementary school, I got a lot of comments about my voice and my speech. One of the most common ones is, why do you sound like you're from Australia? Mm, I made the transition from Oklahoma to Texas in 3rd grade, and that was another big one because I already couldn't say my R's as is, and then I was moving to Texas where, rolled R's are a very common thing. So not only could I not roll my R and blend in, I could also just not say my R at all. So that was another big issue. And, in San Antonio, Texas, in our school district, Spanish starts when you're in kindergarten. So you're learning both languages back to back, and that's part of your music, your art, your PE time, your time during the school day. So a lot of the time, um, I still can't pronounce things most of the time in other languages. As for my English, I'm completely fluent now. However, um, back then I had issues with R and TH in third grade. I had kind of conquered the rest of the language by then. So a lot of the comments were attacking that and criticizing that. Um, but yeah, a lot of the time I had to do my weight, my appearance, um, my stimming, and just I was always told I was negative too. My overall just personality was very negative, but I also had a lot of negative happening, so it was kind of hard to be this, positive yippee girl. And I never saw the negative in myself, but I was often told like, "You're a very negative person." I'd be like, "Okay," and that was like all the way. I mean, that's still told to me today.
I am so sorry. How did your parents dealing with it? Do you remember um what the parents are doing with the school and these bullies and then incidents, filing report? Like, what were they doing? Do you remember? Like, they being advocate for you, or maybe going to school meetings and IEP meetings, or like any bully prevention meetings? Do you recall any of those parents' actions?
Yeah, so my mom and dad were very, very supportive through my school years. Going up until fifth grade, my parents were always in attendance at the IP meetings, rooting for me, putting me back into gen ed fully, and, off that IEP was always their priority. Let's get this girl, let's make her successful. It was always the goal. And so, one of the bullies actually, a lot of them lived in my neighborhood, and I remember one time one of the bullies came to my house and tried to start stuff with me, and my older brother, who's 2 years older than me, walked over to the house and started like screaming at her and putting her in her place. Didn't lay hands, didn't do anything harmful. Just, like was like, don't mess with my sister. And, this was when we were middle school kids. Um, and then going on, when I started getting bullied in middle school, a lot of it was more sexual, about my body and my appearance. And I had a bigger chest than most girls. I had a butt. I have, polycystic ovarian syndrome and just different things. And I didn't know that at the time, but I'm sure that had to do with my appearance. So a lot of the time, I had heavy periods and it was very noticeable. I would bleed through, and so a lot of the guys would make comments about my body and, grab me and do things like that. And so my mom and dad were constantly reporting it to the school. Um, However, they would take me out of class and the counselors to talk to me about it because I was, upset about it. And it was always so awkward because through this whole process, while we were walking, you know, um, we would walk down the hallway and she would present it as a math problem. And, then, kids would hear that and be like, well, she has an A in math. What are they talking about? She's the student council president, like it was weird. And then we would get to the room and she would finally talk about the inappropriate things that were going on, like her class or her office. And so, a lot of the time teachers would say, like, oh, well, it's not really that big of a deal, or they would talk about it, but, talk about it didn't show any consequences. It was just another conversation for kids who didn't care. And so um, you know, when I went to high school, that continued, but I was also adding band into my plate. So those comments also just, I was new to my instrument. I had issues on the field. I was the only girl that played my instrument. So there was also comments around that and just my ability to play because I was brand new in high school. Most people join band in sixth grade. So there was also things with that. And my mom and dad were always meeting with the director to try to figure things out. Um, Sadly, I was approached with comments, like I'm a woman, so I'm property, or different, statements that were just brutal. Um, and, I was called like Cookie Monster and just, I mean, the craziest things.
Well, Becca, it is so heartbreaking. How old are you now?
I'm 21.
You're super young, and then you're so eloquent, and then you are really strong. Um, I am very, very sorry. Um, as a single mom and parent of like Blasian kids, and then myself being a minority, it's been a tough road to not only dealing with the students bullying, but the school, and then means and teachers bully me, biases, and then I can't imagine like your parents what they felt like, how broken they were for you when the kids are constantly falling. But not only that, teachers, like even college, and targeting you. It's a power abuse, and then it is a complete like BS, and it's not okay. And then like my heart completely breaks for you and your parents, and I'm so sorry.
Again, I think it created who I am today. So while I grieve it, I also know that I'm the person I am today because of that, and I don't want to change who I am. So it is what it is. But just just looking back, I laugh and I get to see some of these people and where they are today online, and I'm like, wow, like they're a loser, like, and it's just that negative caught up.
One of the live audience is commenting. It says, "I can relate to my brother who abused me for years. Tells me that I'm being negative every time I would try to confront to talk about it, and he talk about what he did. It's manipulation." And then he also said some people are experts of using words and games to deflect.
He's not wrong.
So
I'm
people
sorry
are,
that you went through that.
yeah, and people who are listening live, and then later on, um, again, Becca, thank you so much for shedding a light, and then telling us the first hand of um, going through life with this differences and challenges that people don't celebrate or embrace, and then brutally target on.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's not fair. So, how about your mental health? Like when you are going through these things, did you have like therapists? Did you have somebody like close friends that you were able to like kind of navigate through as hard as it has been? That is it, other than your parents, is there any friends or like anybody in your life that kind of were able to like share, or was that really hard to share?
So, yeah, I didn't have any therapies. My mom and dad pulled me out of therapies when I was little. And then I just never went back. That was personal though. That wasn't their fault. And then going on to friends. I mean, I did have friends. But looking back, were they real? Probably not. I do not talk to anybody but probably two people from my time before sophomore year of college. And, there's not very many people that, well, more freshman year of college, because I don't like really like the people that and even like after graduating in this past December from my undergrad, it's the same thing. Like a lot of my friends from my undergrad are fading out too. Um, and so I was faced with all of this stuff. And I mean, I had the friends from time to time, but ultimately they weren't always there. Um, but I did try to create friendships, but a lot of the time those friendships would last, 3, 4 months, and then it was okay, we're done with you. Or they would get what they needed out of me and they would move on to the next. And it was just constantly, pushing me to the side. And I was kind of like the, we'll throw you into the circle to not look mean. Um, and I would say it's better now, but as for my mental health was terrible most of my years of high school and middle school, and I typically used work as a way to escape. Um, Even in my undergrad, same thing. I used work and I used accomplishments and things and tried to become and put as many labels on myself to escape real problems I had because I didn't have an outlet. And so going to work and talking to people was my outlet. Volunteering for, ridiculous amounts of hours and not getting any sleep was my outlet. Um, Sometimes I would wake up at 2 a.m. and just start writing. And writing was my outlet. I have a journal that goes all the way back to, um, early middle school, where it's just my mental health journal outlet. And there's some pretty interesting letters in there just to myself and who I want to be and the woman I wanted to become. And um, some parts of that woman I am today, other parts of that woman I'm not. And it's all for the best.
My heart completely breaks for you, Becca. And then again, as a parent, and I can't imagine, like, what your mom, dad are feeling to see their daughter go through this, and then that you are trying really hard to either fit in, make friends, and navigate through the life as human being. And then I just feel sad because you're so young and you're 21 years old, that I thought this world would have been better compared to when I grew up in Japan, when I was bullied, and then I didn't have the IEP, I didn't have disability. However, I was heavily abused, and then like nobody noticed, and then manipulated and stuff, but I had no help. And then right now, this, in terms of the child sex abuse, it's in America especially, getting more educated and getting more help and then awareness around it. So as 47 years old myself, that I thought your generation is much more inclusive, and then less of this BS and targeting. And it's so heartbreaking to hear, as young as you are, that you still have to go through that.
Yeah. I would say that you'd be surprised what a lot of these people that have said things about me, their views on the world and how they see things, um, and how their personality matches that. It's very hypocritical, and I would say that most of my generation, I think the best way to put it is hypocritical. Um, it's very, we need to love all until you're not us. Um, and I've seen that consistently throughout my whole life. Um, I've never fit in politically. I've never fit in religiously. I've never fit in, I mean, even in Texas, racially, I guess you could say, culturally. Um, it's very, if you're not me, you're not someone I want to be. And I mean, but then when they, go and have an opinion politically, religiously, whatever else it may be, um, it's to love all. And it's like, okay, but you're not doing that in your actions day to day. And I think in order to have a belief, you have to follow that belief in your actions, not just in your words.
Well, I'm very speechless. And then again, I'm extremely sorry that everything that you had to go through, and I can't even comprehend um, what it was like for you to even show up to school, what it was like for you to even wake up, get ready, and go to school.
Um, most of the time, in order to get to that point in school and to want to go to school, again, I use leadership roles as my escape. So I was, student council president. I was National Junior Honor Society treasurer. I was, band special events. I was always in a leadership role. I was always leading something. And that was the reason I wanted to go to school, was I was in roles that I could have power, and that power, and I did very good in those positions. It wasn't just a title on my name, but that's why I kept getting chosen for them by staff. But you know i I was always kind of like, this is what gives me a reason to want to go to school and gives me a reason to you know wake up and go to school, because if I hadn't had any of those roles, I wouldn't have had a role at all.
Yeah, speechless. But thank you so much for being so eloquent and shedding a light to these real issues that people don't talk about, and we need to do a better job and bring more awareness. And I feel responsible for being an adult and a journalist, and I'm very happy that we are doing this podcast and then having a conversation, a real conversation like this. I truly believe that it sparks something somewhere that people are listening to. They're gonna start to talk about it, and hopefully some politicians or policymakers or whatever will listen to your voice,
Hmm.
and then you be an advocate for these particular issues that next generation hopefully won't have to go through what you went through.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And my graduate degree is in educational policy, specifically in terms of wanting to focus on the aspects of bullying and educational policies around bullying and disability and awareness and acceptance with that, because it's there's so much lack of conversation. I student taught 1 year, and one of the things that amazed me was we were talking about differences and we were trying to explain differences, and the only thing that the teacher could come up with to teach differences and how people view differences in a negative light and shouldn't was the Holocaust. And the fact that that's what we have to use to teach that everyone's different and it shouldn't be negatively looked at, like, just like in the Holocaust where people were looked at as different and it shouldn't be negatively looked at because the Holocaust was an awful thing. Because those people were mistreated and shouldn't have been mistreated, you know, by, you know, the Nazis and everything. But, that was their example of teaching differences. And I was like, you know, that's not, I mean, little kids won't understand that, because they don't understand history yet, So I was like, why are we using the Holocaust to teach about differences? Why are we not in, or even, slavery? You know, those things are terrible, but, a 6-year old doesn't understand those concepts yet.
Yeah, I totally agree. One of the audience said, I never understood where teachers were able to sit back, watch kids bully each other. Sadly, the workplace can be just as bad.
Yeah, most of my teachers always told me, well, just go see a counselor. Or just go see the school counselor. And I was like, okay, but the school counselor like doesn't see what happens in the classroom. So like I can see the school counselor and tell her, but like how do they know that my word is true?
And then the truth is, when the school bully happened, it's about she said, he said, and then there's no record, and then no recording device. There's a camera, but there's no audio. So it is so hard to prove. And then teachers can bend the story for you too.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And they can take sides. And I hope that I'm never the teacher that does that. I am currently looking for special education jobs. So,
I understand, but what happens is even within the teacher, I've heard the teacher get bullied by the powers, and then even minority teachers get bullied by the powers, and then, they end up not being able to work, and then so it's not just the kids, but then it's just like bad cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then he said, and then people shame you by saying you should speak sometimes, but when you speak, nobody takes you seriously or even blames you. When you say it out.
Yeah. Sorry, my phone dropped. But yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, people shame you by saying everything that they can say. And then, of course, when you speak up, people are going to shame you because you're not speaking up the way they want you to. And that's going to happen no matter what side you take of the aisle.
Well, Becca, I really admire you and appreciate you for being so courageous and then came to a gift university today. So let's dive into our second question, which is the tools that you use to overcome. And this is by far my favorite part of the podcast. You are my guest 135 and show that over 134 guests had shared their tools that they used to overcome for the unique challenges that they had to go through. So you've had a lot, but and then you mentioned a little bit too, but what are the tools that you used that worked for you the most to navigate through these challenges?
Writing was my biggest outlet. And then, of course, in terms of um, other tools, I used, conversation. I tried to use friends as much as I could. Sometimes in my later years, I used, um, I used memes. I made memes of different things that made me angry. And not to say that that was a good coping mechanism. It was dependent on what I did with those memes. However, most of the time I kept them to myself and I would just laugh at them in my own head. And it helped. No, I did not include anyone's like face or, private things. It was like, a fake monkey cartoon with, funny words. Um, but I used a lot of like memes to cope. I used social media to cope. I found friends, uh, typically through competitions and things that I did with different organizations and met people at other schools. And then I would talk to them through social media. So I found outlets outside of school to make friends, which was definitely a tool. Um, so social media benefited me in a lot of positive ways back then, as well as finding an outlet through knitting. I knit a lot, so when I'm really stressed, I'm a machine knitter, so I spin a handle. So when I'm really stressed, I go faster. Or when I'm really upset, I'll go faster because I have to like spin this wheel. Um, and that wheel, of course, makes something, and then it's a creative outlet. Uh, Always has been my creative outlet. Sometimes even in class, I would bring my knitting loom, and like once I finished my assignments, I would knit. Um, and then trying to think of more tools. Um, I guess too, I made a lot of relationships with adults. I didn't have a lot of um, children, my age relationship. So if I was going out to lunch with people, they were 40, and that's still the case. And a lot of my friendships were people who were older than me. And they were more mentors, of course, than friendships, but I volunteered with local organizations, and a lot of the time I met people that way that were older than me, and they would, come pick me up and help me, get places, volunteer places. Or my mom would take me, and I would get to, hang out with people that were much more mature, much more set in their ways, and help me become a woman rather than an immature brat like most of the kids I was growing up around with. um, so, befriending people that were older and could be more of a mentor than a friend was also another outlet. or tool.
Well, thank you so much for sharing the tool. So let's move on to the last question, which is a gift that came from the adversity. So, what would you say, a gift that came from your adversity?
Just like the tools I mentioned, my writing talks about what I've accomplished. It talks about things I've gone through, what I've faced. So, all of that is from what I've faced and due to my, adversity and what I've tried to navigate and how I've navigated it. And that's a lot of what my writing is about. I have one publication that just came out in February, and I have three more coming out um, and this year, and I'm super, super excited. I also found my career through what I've gone through. Had I not been diagnosed with the things I had been, had I not been on an IEP, had I not seen all of the differences between me and my peers, I wouldn't want to go into special education. So, of course, my undergraduate degree and my graduate degree were based on what I had gone through and the relationship I want to build with kids for the rest of their lives and the relationship I want to create.
Thank you so much. What is your big dream in your life, if you can pick?
Reform the American education system. That would be, if I could just from the ground up reform the education system in every way that it possibly needs to be, I would be honored. And I think a lot of the things that I believe need to be reformed are bipartisan issues. Um, I think the problem with our education system is it's a very partisan argument, but children shouldn't be tossed around like political figurines. Um, and I actually helped a school system reform. I helped with a book, and it is just school system reform, and it's about the ways we can reform the system to adjust to the kid. And it talks about making schools based on kids interest areas and designing schools to bring out kids strengths. Right now we throw a lot of things that will never be used or never be needed at a child, especially with our today's technology. And so, you know by about eighth grade I knew that math wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So why was I forced to take 5 more math classes? Have I used any of those math classes since? No. So, I think about these things and I'm like, we need to I guess my biggest dream is, and I could go on about it for hours, is reforming that system from the ground up and making it more children and kids centered, uh in both, the developmental factors, the educational factors, the teaching factors, um, and finding the child rather than the child finding, finding the child through the system rather than the system attacking the child.
Well, Becca, and then our audience, I really want you to consider maybe going to be a Congress, and then really work on the policy making. There's Maxwell Frost, who is Gen Z, the youngest congressman from Florida. That he's really amazing. Maxwell Frost, congressman,
Mhm.
25 years old, and Jasmine Crockett from Texas. She's a civil rights attorney, black female congresswoman that's been so powerful and eloquent, shedding so much light to civil rights and then systematic change issues. And then I think you're going to be one of those.
Yeah. I considered running for state board, but right now I'm on the edge. So I'm like, we'll see. State board of education. And the problem is because I see education as such a bipartisan issue, I'm like, I can't decide a party because I don't agree with either political party when it comes to education at all. I'm so just here. Trying to find here is not working out for me because the ideas I have for the system are all based on data and just what I've studied. And it's not about the money, it's not about the, you know, content, it's all about the way it's put out.
Well, Becca, I think you're brilliant, and I think you are really point on in you were talking great issues, and I think we need more, younger generation um that are not afraid to talk about this. So definitely check out Maxwell Frost. Congressman Frost has been an advocate for many young generations, but he's very powerful. So I think what I want to tell you and the audience is that although you're different and although you are excluded, and then at the end of the day, I was talking to one of my respected friend that as a minority woman, Asian female journalist and filmmaker, podcaster, that overcame child sex abuse and domestic violence, bullying, homelessness, that I was muted, I was silenced, and I never had a voice. So I'm very grateful for this platform, my followers, and audience that support me. And then be in America where less of the gender gap that I'm experiencing than in Japan, that I'm able to speak out. So I encourage you and I encourage audience to keep moving forward and then shedding a light to these issues. So thank you so much, Becca, for coming to a gift from adversity today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you to our audience. Again, please spread the word and share the episode. And feel free to comment. And we have more wonderful guests coming to our show. So stay tuned. See you next time.